So I do, I'm also an intern, kind of doing like part-time work, part-time student, but I finish up in May. My internship is qualify for front-end. Yeah, I'll be wrapping up hopefully, see about a full-time conversion. If not, then yeah, it's a job seat, but we'll get it. Yeah, we'll get it. We'll see. Yeah, we just, I guess we really got into the cursor vibe, like, I would say when I transferred over to my most recent placement, literally everyone figured out how to use it.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. But it's hard to balance, kind of like you were saying, where it's like I'm still trying to learn it myself. Because I'm working primarily in like React and TypeScript and all that stuff. Is what this just gave me the actual answer, or is it like the idea that somehow get a really good prompt that will help you find answers. But you mentioned that it's really about writing SQL. Yeah, and it's actually what is happening right now is that there are neural networks that are called text to SQL. Literally, that's how they work. And it's from and then you back the SQL query. It's a huge field. It's using Variation output. But you guys always see this all models, right? Something like which one is better. By the you gotta find that model that's for your process, right? So if you are able to find some good model that's giving you pretty good answers, you can be way more efficient than just using cloud, for example, or just touching cloud. What do you mean by specifically for certain domains, like their output? Or you just saying, what I'm saying is that that a model is just a huge neural network, right? Training with something, right? I don't want to get into the abstract or whatever. That model is expert doing this, right? But also, if you look at the spectrum of all the options that you have for AI, you have text to speech, you have image to image, you have text to image. There are models that are jobs for those things. Okay. When I mentioned text to image, for example, it's a model for a neural network that grabs text and gives you an image. Okay. Right? So, in terms of AI experts, using this model,
What's the name of the
find the best neural network that can suit for you. I think AI model it's kind of like a buzzword, where I think
Buzzword, yeah.
what I from the research perspective, obviously I think that I'm too deep in what they are doing, but as a tool, there are too much tools right now out there. When I'm saying like too much tool, if you have you ever guys used Hugging Face?
I've heard of it.
Try Hugging Face, try to download some open source models that are out there, and they have APIs. You can literally ask ChatGPT, hey, can you create me the inference for this model of Hugging Face? And you just download the model in your computer, and you try to ask him questions. In Hugging Face, you can find text to image to image, video to image, 3D, text to 3D, whatever, text to SQL. In Hugging Face, what you guys will see is there are way more better answers that ChatGPT now can do. Obviously, now the answers are pretty competitive because they already are integrated with your VS Code, with your person. So, but there are a lot of options. If you have something, I think that something really good, fast, and strong. Of course, I use it. I don't know what you want to do. Something that fits whatever that you should want. It's not difficult. It's pretty easy. Just do that. Learn how they bring those programs together. For my guys, from someone who's been building models from scratch and creating them, what I would say is that if you're really good at the language that the model was trained, for example, English, Russian, whatever it is, if you're good at the language, you have the fundamental of how you need to ask. For example, if you use the word, I don't know, sorter operator, if you run exposition, you have the fundamentals. And then on top of that, you just wait for them. You have all the foundations. You can use whatever. You grab multiple models and try to use. What is it like that? How about that?
So yeah, good conference. In order to be a good conference.
I mean, if all of you guys are already in the IT technology, or okay, this one is going with this thing is going with this thing, or this is back end, this is for that. Do something really that sounds really because how they models were trained. They were trained using how they how humans if we are going to move for jobs, that's a good question.
That is the flip side for that is with all of the, we'll call it like the junk that gets generated, there's going to be a market for people that solve the swing factor and like realize all of that. You know, it's going to be interesting.
Have you ever guys seen this? It's a Twitter post. I don't know, a guy who says two posted his API key open in GitHub. Yeah, you see that post, but he maxed out the API key. I don't know what that. It's invented. It's not going to be a market for people that just look at your phone. Look at this line. $1,000. Right.
I told them to start the live stream. I don't know if they've done it yet.
Learn, you can use
Maybe I know the end of the session, because at the end of the session we can share our LinkedIn. I'm currently doing robots. I don't know anything about this. My domain is robotics and quantum.
Hello. Hello, hello. Cool. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. How's everybody doing? Cool. So my name is Ryan. I'm one of the co-organizers of GDG. This is Chad. He is also our keynote speaker and one of the other co-organizers too. And then Mike, who's standing right there in the center of everything. That is our other co-organizer. So I just want to give all of them a round of applause in addition to Serena, who is the GDG on campus at UT organizer. So this event would not be possible without everyone. So big round of applause. Just a few things to go through. So first thing, unfortunately, we did have another speaker named Numa. She got very sick over the weekend, so she is not able to be here. But to her benefit, Chad has spent all weekend preparing his note, extending his talk, and he has some really cool stuff he's going to show us today and talk about. So an extra big round of applause for Chad for not only organizing, also being our speaker today. Next, I think I got everybody that walked in. If I missed anyone for parking validation, please come and find me. I will give you a slip. All you have to do is scan that barcode at the kiosk, and then you will get that $8 validation for parking. Sandwiches, I think everybody pretty much knows that we have sandwiches, but if you don't, they're all over there. We do have vegan options for everyone if you need. It is first come, first serve, so please go get one if you haven't. Let's see, I went through parking, and then very exciting. So for GDG, we have locked in this location. Thank you to Mike for getting us in the Capital Factory. So we will be here on the first Monday of each month doing an event. Yes, big round of applause for that. Yes. Woo! We're going to do all types of stuff. So we'll do tech talks, workshops, co-working. We do like side project show-offs, lightning talks. So please do get registered on these if you haven't already. That is where we'll post all of our events. It's automatically emailed to you every time we post something, so you will be in the know and ready to go. Let's see. And then Mike, we also do organize Flutter Austin, as you can see from my shirt. Mike is going to be running Flutter Fridays. So if anybody, you don't have to develop with Flutter to go, but if you do want to go co-work somewhere, please get registered on Flutter Austin Meetup. He will be posting those events every time we run one. It's great. We can go network, work. And I think that is pretty much it from me. My name is Ryan, too, by the way. Outside of organizing GDG, I am the founder of a company called Whistler. We do staffing solutions for the software space. So if anybody wants to talk about searching for a job, finding talent, I'm happy to chat. That is all I'll say on that, I promise. And then I'm going to pass it over to Serena. She wants to say a couple words, but thank you all for being here.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. I'm Serena. I'm a junior at UT majoring in informatics, data science, and computer science. And so yeah, I just wanted to introduce us. So we're Google developer groups on campus at UT Austin. And we're just basically the on-campus version of the GDG Austin. And basically we have events for UT students like workshops, hackathons, guest speaker events, like networking events, all things tech pretty much to help aspiring tech professionals to get their footing in the path and just learn new skills. It's Google backed, so a lot of our events are Google supported, and we get access to different Google technologies like Gemini, Vertex AI, Google Cloud Platform. We're always hearing about all the new things that Google is working on, so it's a great space to be in. And so I would like to introduce Chad. He's been a working professional for over 20 years in the mobile app development space. He's currently, he's had positions such as the VP of Engineering and has a lot of experience in that and is currently an independent creator. So yeah, please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you, Serena. All right, welcome everybody to Flutter Austin. What do you think about our backdrop here? This is quite a step up from the bar that we used to host these in. Okay, so I am going to give this talk, if I can find it. That's not it. Here we go. All right, so AI engineering. I just want to say, thank you to Capital Factory for hosting us, as well as Google is sponsoring this event. So all the sandwiches and drinks and everything is credit to Google. We appreciate that. Again, my name is Chad Pavliska, and let me go over the agenda real quick. We're going to talk a little bit about this vibe coding. Who's heard of vibe coding now? It's gone viral. About half the room raised their hands. So we're going to talk a little bit about vibe coding, whether it's real or not. The hype is warranted. I'm going to review my engineering stack that I'm using. And just for context, I'm a mobile app developer. I do front end and back end as well. My stack of choice is Flutter, cross-platform. On the back end, I have one project that uses an older back-end database technology called Parse. It's like Supabase or Firebase, and I have another project that uses Firebase. So that's and most of my career is specialized in product development. So it's a little bit different than some other development roles. So a lot of the context for my talk will kind of come from that perspective. The app that I'll be showing off it's not actually relevant to the presentation. It's just what I happen to be working on right now so that I can talk about AI. But that app has been in production for 10 years. It started out as a side project with just a buddy of mine. I'm now working on that full time for the last 2 years. So it is a production app, and we'll actually be implementing in a live demo the very next feature we're going to ship. So I thought that would be as real world as it could get. This is not a demo that's just designed to look snazzy or something. This is real code on a production app. And one other caveat before I move on. I'm not a YouTube influencer. I'm not a professional speaker. I'm just a practitioner, probably like most of y'all. So I'm speaking about my experience using these coding tools, these new coding tools. I had around January, I kind of switched stacks and made some changes, and I had a huge leap in progress and experienced a huge leap. And so that's kind of what I'm talking through. And this is based on my real world experience. A lot of the YouTube content that I've seen, you can tell that these people are professional YouTube creators. And so they're constantly just making up hypothetical examples and demo apps, and these things look impressive. They get a lot of viral clicks. I'm hoping this presentation is unique in the sense that this is something real world. And I'm not here to hype it up. I'm here to tell you what I found is working and what I found is not working. So we'll talk about that. All right. Okay, so let's start off. Let's get into this vibe coding thing. It was popularized by this guy, Andrej Karpathy. He's got a YouTube channel. He was the head of Tesla AI, and I think he was one of the founders of OpenAI as well. This guy's got some serious credentials. I think he's independent now, and he's just making this great content on YouTube. I would check it out. He talks a lot about LLMs and how they actually work and how they're constructed. But he on a weekend, he needed to do a side project to solve a problem that he had. He wanted to push AI to see how far it could go, and he coined this term called vibe coding. So he says where we fully give into the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that the code even exists. So this went viral. I think this tweet has 4.5 million views now. And a lot of people are talking about vibe coding, and there's a lot of detractors too, talking about it, saying like this is our brains are going to melt. nobody's going to have any engineering discipline anymore. This is terrible to, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think what you need to do, though, is consider the context in which he said this. This was a weekend project. It was a personal app that he was going to build, but his goal was to solve an actual problem that he had. And I think his other goal was, he wanted to see how far the AI had come. Could he write the entire application without even looking at the code? Just accept every change it offers, and if it has a bug, instead of diving into the code, which is our first instinct as engineers, just tell the AI to fix the bug. And it was kind of his experience with that. I think it was kind of a neat approach. I will say, when I first saw it, it did kind of prompt me to push the AI harder. I was using AI, but I would find myself like drifting away from it and just manually coding because I knew how to do something. And this vibe coding concept, it did kind of push me to say, hey, maybe I need to be doing more with this and explore and see what's there. And so the way I'm approaching it and the way I'm using it in the context is similar to when you talk about you're writing a paper or an essay, and they tell you, get that first draft out quick. Don't stop and edit. Don't fix your grammar. Don't fix your spelling mistakes. Get your ideas on paper. The quality comes from the edits that you do later and the revisions that you do later. So that's the way that I'm using and approaching vibe coding. It's where I'm using the AI tools, I'm writing the entire feature, and I'm getting something up and running as fast as possible. And if I like it, I'll continue editing from there. And then I'll do all my traditional software engineering stuff, right? I'll do the full code review before I commit. I'll write all the unit tests. Or actually, the AI will write the unit test, but I'll verify the unit test. I'll actually run the app and test it. I mean, imagine that. So the way I'm using vibe coding is like that first draft that I want to hit quick. It helps me get into the flow, get some momentum, and get the process started. And then I have so much momentum that I think is actually where the productivity gain is coming. It's because it's kind of, I'm getting that dopamine hit very quickly. Okay, which makes it a lot of fun. All right, before we move forward and start talking about the AI tool stack that I'm using, I want to level set a little bit here and do a little context setting. This idea of this tool classification. This actually, in some of the YouTube videos I've seen, kind of gets confused and lost. People will conflate tools like Cursor, Windsurf, and Cline with things like V0, Bolt, Replit. These are probably all tools that you might have heard of and somewhat familiar with. These tools on the left, I would call the category prototype builders. These things are great if you want to start from scratch, greenfield development, mostly web apps, and you want to stand something up really quickly and you don't want to write any code. It's also really great for non-software engineers. So maybe product managers who want to prototype something, but you want to start from scratch. I don't have a lot of experience using this class of tools, so I'm not going to say anything negative about them. They look really impressive. But that's not the tool set I'm talking about today. It's not solving the problem that I'm trying to solve either. The tools on the right, these coding assistants, I didn't even include the first one, which is Copilot. But Copilot, Cursor, Windsurf, Aider, Cline, these are all examples of code assistants. These are tools that drop into a software engineer's workflow and aid in assist with code development. So these are the tools or class of tools I'm talking about. Now, I did use AI to help build this presentation because I really do not like writing presentations. So it does look a little silly, so bear with me on that. But this is my stack of choice, and I have used a number of these tools. I started out with GitHub Copilot. Before that, I was just copying and pasting stuff between ChatGPT and my IDE. Copilot was interesting. It was just like a better autocomplete. And then I switched to Cursor. That was a big leap forward. Cursor was tighter integration into the IDE. But around January, I switched to using a tool called Cline. Klein is an open source plugin to VS Code. It's an AI assistant, code assistant. That was when I had kind of a big leap, and so we'll talk about that. Klein can talk to, say, Anthropic, Sonnet directly, but I'm actually using a tool in a layer of indirection in between called OpenRouter. And so Klein will talk to OpenRouter. OpenRouter, I have a dev account with OpenRouter, a credit card on file with them. I have credits on that account. And then behind them, they'll redirect all of my AI API calls to whatever underlying models that I want to hit. And they list just about all of them. It's pretty impressive. And then the last call out I'll make here is just making a distinction between a provider and the LLM itself. So the LLM being the model or the model family, Sonnet, ChatGPT, Gemini, and then the provider being the host or the platform that is that's providing that model. And one of the big things I learned was that even proprietary models like Sonnet, they can be hosted on several platforms. And what's great is OpenRouter kind of abstracts all that from you, meaning it'll round robin those API requests across multiple providers, depending on uptime, latency, cost, and other variables, and they'll hide all that from you. It's pretty nice. And then the last big thing I'll say is, I had started out using Sonnet right around that time. DeepSeek dropped, and then I was like, oh, I want to check this out. I kind of balked at the idea of creating a dev account with DeepSeek and giving my credit card number to a company in China and then sending all my source code to them. So that's when I found OpenRouter, and DeepSeek being an open source model, it's hosted on several providers. And so I felt much better about that. So OpenRouter is, I could route to a provider here in the US that's hosting DeepSeek and use it that way. So that's when OpenRouter kind of unlocked my mind. And then the last thing I wanted to say about that, two things. This stack is just what's working for me. I'm not trying to say this is like the ultimate, penultimate stack. In fact, there's so much innovation happening at these tool levels. I'm sure Cursor has like copied half the things that I think are great about Klein and maybe even leapfrogged, right? But I'm actually trying to write software every day, and so I'm not necessarily running around like testing every single one of the tools out head to head and updating those comparisons all the time. So all I'm saying here is that this is what's working for me right now, and I'm getting a lot of value out of it, and I'll show that to you. And then the last thing was like, and this is a bigger insight. Especially when I went to OpenRouter, I became more agnostic about which model I'm actually using. OpenRouter even has a feature where it'll route your request. It'll use a meta model to inspect your request, and it'll route it to the model that's maybe cheapest or maybe fastest for that type of request, or maybe better at that type of request. It's pretty impressive. I became more agnostic about the model and the platform it's running on. I think, you know, what I'm finding is all of the current family of models are all actually pretty good at writing code in the way that I'm doing it, and that the real innovation's happening at the tooling level. So Klein, Cursor, Windsurf, that's what I think you should, as software engineers, I think you should be really tuning into, because the innovation that's really impacting our workflow is happening at that level. Go ahead. So Klein, the question is, does it have RAG to train on our own code bases? Yes and no. So Klein supports that the MCP, Model Context Protocol. So you could theoretically, you create an MCP server that'll connect to a RAG database. So in theory, you could do that. Yeah, so Klein is not going to help you implement RAG at all. You would have to set all that up. It could call into RAG if that was going to provide you some context that helped you in your coding workflow. I guess your question might be leading to something I didn't say, which is today I'm talking about using AI to improve the coding workflow. I'm not actually talking about using AI within my product, right? Which I think was where RAG might be even more critical for different use cases. Okay, so we're going to get into the demo now, if I can find it. All right, I have very limited screen real estate here. All right, so this is my Visual Studio IDE, and the first thing I want to give you a little bit of context on the app and what problem that we're going to be solving today. So this is an app called Interseed. Again, the app's not important to this, but we just rebranded this app and shipped it. And as part of that rebrand, we had new design and a new font that we felt was a more traditional font for, this is an app for Catholics, and that we felt is more traditional. But the feedback that we're getting from these users is that this font is a little bit harder to read, and they don't like the amount of line spacing that I provided, and I didn't want to just revert back to the older non-branded system fonts, but I will say those system fonts are very readable because Apple and Google are going to put a ton of effort into making sure that they're very readable fonts. So the idea that I had was to address the feedback was actually, I've got a screenshot here, to provide readability settings to the user so they could have control over how the readability actually looked. And so I took this screenshot from the Kindle app, which is where I knew that this was there. So in Kindle, because the whole value prop of that app is reading, they've got these readability settings, so I can increase and decrease font size, change the color, change the line spacing, that type of thing. So the idea here is, could I just have the AI assistant create a readability settings page on that prayer page in the app so the users can have more control over that readability? Okay. And like I said, this couldn't be more real world. Like, we just updated this app a week and a half ago, and I've got to ship this update this week. I just thought it would be a great demo though, because I want these settings to be saved and persisted to disk. So it does cut through the entire layer of the architecture of the app, but it doesn't have a backend call, so it kind of limits the scope a little bit of complexities, so it'd be great for this demo, but it is very real world. Okay, so I showed you the image. So the first thing I'm going to do is, with these tools, this is all about context management. So these tools are going to take whatever context they can get a hold of and give that to the LLM to help it understand what you're trying to achieve. One of the things I found is they'll take all of your open tabs, and who doesn't leave 99 open tabs all the time? They'll take all of your open tabs and they'll sometimes feed that up to the LLM. So the first thing you need to do is start with a clean slate, close everything out. I would even check in, make sure you're on a clean branch. That way you can also revert. So you've just got a clean slate here. And then the other thing I did, I slightly altered my kind of standard workflow because of the presentation. I started writing the prompt in a text file, and I think I'm going to end up keeping this. It was much better, much easier for me to think in a text file versus if I come in here to Klein, this is my prompt window. Obviously, you can't see what you're writing there, so I would stick with this. It's more conducive to writing much longer prompts, and as you can see, you need to be pretty specific. The AI doesn't know your project. They don't know who you are. They don't know anything about your project. So you need to feed as much relevant context to the AI as you can, but not too much, because if you give it too much context, it'll hallucinate and get confused and lose attention. So it's this balancing act of giving it enough context. This amount of context is nothing, and I'll show you that here in a minute. So anyway, you don't have to read the prompt, but I'm basically describing in English, and I even referenced that screenshot. My attempt was, I know that I can attach a screenshot to a prompt, but my attempt was to reference the screenshot in the code and just say, hey, go look at that screenshot because I want you to kind of implement that. That doesn't work, by the way. No. It can't read a JPEG file. It's a different content. But if I attached it, it would have worked. Okay, so I'm going to take this here. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in, and I'm going to move over. This is the first innovation, one of the first innovations that really kind of made Klein kind of click with me. They have a separate plan versus act mode. So in plan mode, I'm going to give it a prompt, which is called my task prompt. It's going to combine that with a system prompt that you provide in the configuration. And I'll go ahead and kick this off so it starts. But it's going to combine those prompts, and it's going to start making those API requests. Right now, I'm configured to call Quasar Alpha. By the way, anybody heard of Quasar yet? Okay. I think it dropped Friday. That's how fast this stuff's moving. But if I were to like blank this out just to give you an idea, these are all the models that I could call through OpenRouter. I mean, I think it's all of them. I mean, basically. So it's pretty amazing. If I want to just try out different models, I can do that. I'm using Quasar Alpha. Quasar is it's a cloaked model, which I think it's the first time I've seen this. But I don't know. I don't want to go on a tangent on it. I think it's actually Gemini. I think it's Google's Gemini 3. And the reason I think that is because it has a context window of 1 million tokens, which is exactly what Gemini 2 has. And the fact that it's a cloaked model, which is kind of unique, I think it's actually Google sort of testing, getting early feedback on the model. And it's going viral on the OpenRouter platform. Yeah, so a lot of the Google models, especially when they're in beta, or in like this, in this case, it's cloaked, is free. Which is the reason I'm using it on the planning side. I'll switch to a paid model on the Act side because I just want to demo that, but yeah, this is actually free. And then the second thing I really love about Klein is the transparency I get. Cursor and Copilot are kind of a all-you-can-eat subscription models, $10 or $20 a month, whether you use the product or not. And as a solo developer, I don't code every single day. So there can be times where maybe I go work on a different project, or maybe I go work on something else. And so pay as you go is actually, I think, cheaper for me, or has been so far. I think if I were working full time, it would get more expensive, especially if I were using the more expensive models. But I could also switch to something like Quasar or Gemini 2.5, which I think is still free as well. But what I really like about Klein is that it shows me the context window and how much of the context I've consumed. So this allows me to know how much context I'm sending up in number of tokens. And one thing that I've observed, and I've confirmed this, or other people have kind of confirmed this that I follow online, is that those context windows are sort of marketing driven. And I think it may be task dependent as well. But even if, let's say, a model like Sonnet has a 200K context window, if you get close to that 200K, it might start doing weird things, right? It might start like repeating itself, hallucinating, forgetting things that you told it, but it's even still within that 200K limit. So what I'm saying is, as you approach the 200K limit, performance can start diving off. And so you are going to want to sort of manage that context. As the engineer, you kind of need to know, all right, is the size of this feature that I'm trying to bite off too big? And try to manage that context window. I suspect that these are not actually hard limits, just being an engineer, thinking about it, I don't think that there's a literal hard limit at 1 million tokens. I think the company that's releasing the model is putting that there as a sort of a guide. They know through extensive testing probably where performance starts dropping, and so they're going to put that context window around there. I've seen some models with, say, a 1 million context window perform at 100K tokens worse than Sonnet performs at 180K tokens. So it just depends. Okay, so as we were talking, and I don't have much real estate here, as we were talking, Quasar has actually planned the entire feature. So he starts off and he kind of summarizes, he or she kind of summarizes the feature that I've asked for, and then the approach is to read this memory bank. I'm not going to get into this, it's kind of a tangent, but it's another feature of Klein, or at least an innovation where I think that they may have started. Other people may have it now. But I have a set of project files, text files, where I've kind of documented my project, what the project's for, what the tech stack is, some of the system patterns that I tend to use. That's all documented in here. And then in the system prompt of Klein, it says, before you do any work, go read their memory bank, get familiar with their project. So already I've given the LLM a fighting chance about understanding my project. So it reads those, and then it starts analyzing the specific screens that I recommend as a starting point, and then followed import references and other paths to decide what other screens it might want to read. So it starts by reading a bunch of files. And again, with Klein, I can see every API request. So it's going to read one file, send that up. Read another file, send that up. So it's sending all these API requests. It understands that this is MVVM architecture. So it's picking up stuff from these contexts, from these files. And now it's going to start reading the specific prayer screens. And again, on my own, I probably would read this a lot closer, but I'm not going to do that tonight. Here it's just saying to try to read a file that doesn't exist. That's because that's one of the files it's going to need to create. Okay, so this all looks good. I'm just going to go ahead and move forward here. So it's basically giving me a summary of what it would do to build this. Now, you got to think about this plan mode as you should be having some back and forth with the LLM. I've kind of already had that back and forth, and I've extended the the first time I ran this, my prompt was half the size, and it asked me a bunch of questions, follow-up questions, as it should. And instead of just answering there, I actually put all of those answers back into the prompt. And then, so it's not asking me any questions, it kind of knows what to do. Interesting side benefit of this presentation is it even did a visual diagram. So it's going to recommend I go ahead and switch over to Act mode and go ahead and kick this thing off. I'm going to go ahead and get that going. For Act, I'm going to use Anthropic's Claude 3.7. That kind of seems to be one of the popular choices right now. Although I'll say, like, the side benefit of this presentation, I've now implemented this feature probably 8 times. And I've used different models to implement it. And I've even used the same model to implement it multiple times. Every single time is different. The output's different. And sometimes there's aspects of one that I'm like, ooh, I kind of like that. Or there'll be aspects of another, like, ooh, I wouldn't do it that way, but I do like this other thing. And so there may be some lesson there that it's so cheap to build this way and do these passes. There may be something to, why don't you make a few passes at it, put them all in separate branches, and then have that inform your prompt design and sort of incorporate the things that you liked about each one into your prompt, which you've saved in a file now, and now feed that back in and start over and build the thing for real. So I might modify my own workflow here. As this thing's going, I'll show you again. So now it's, Klein has recognized that with the Claude model, there's a 200K context window limit. I've currently consumed 55K of that. I've sent up 500,000 tokens, and I've spent 32 cents. And in fact, it even knows per API request, like this API request costs 4.5 cents. So it's giving me that transparency of exactly what's going on underneath the hood that I don't remember getting with Cursor or GitHub Copilot. All right, so as this thing is running, it's just cranking away here. With Flutter, we have something called stateful. Who in here is familiar with Flutter, by the way? Anybody? Maybe a quarter of you? Okay. So Flutter has a feature. It has one of the best. I came from iOS native. That platform has gotten dreadful from a developer standpoint. It's so slow now moving back to Xcode and doing anything native. The sort of build or write code, compile, deploy, check your changes, that loop is so terribly slow in iOS compared to Flutter. React Native has this as well, but it's called stateful hot reload. So this app will actually, as it's compiling, as long as it compiles, it'll update in real time with state. And so I can see the changes. There's no visual editor with Flutter. I see the changes appearing live. And if you've got a maximum request, client will stop you at a batch of 20 API requests. That's a configurable limit, but it's probably good to turn on. Like I said, when these models, if they start hallucinating, they can't get in a loop. So that thing had stopped. But as this thing's going, you can actually see the changes showing up in your app real time. I could have, yeah. Yeah. But I'm taking one for the team. I'm spending 50 cents to show you the accurate presentation. When I started, I was using Claude or Sonnet 3.5, and another hunch that I have, just being an engineer. So we had Claude 3.5, and then 3.7 came out, and I experienced this, and there's two other people I know kind of said the same thing. They felt like it was a step backwards from 3.5 in performance. I suspect that maybe the Anthropic engineers saw something with, like, they made 3.5 consume too many resources. Maybe it was doing something internally they didn't like. It was too expensive. And so 3.7 might be a detuned 3.5. It's just a hunch, but what's that? Okay. Okay, I haven't seen that one. There's a 3.7 thinking model. There's also a max. Okay, yeah. I mean, this stuff is moving so fast. But yeah, I've run this demo with Gemini. Gemini does really well. That's Google's model. And I also did DeepSeek. I did find DeepSeek kind of ignores some of the system prompts, but it's pretty decent at planning. Uh-huh. Yeah, so if you, I can't show you now, but if you start a new task, it will reset your context window, and then, so you could take, say, just the output, where you're, the current state of things, and restart the task, and that would reset your window.
You never mentioned about the setting up the client thing. That is difficult. How was that process?
It was pretty straightforward. I mean, it's just a VS Code plugin, so that part is straightforward. And then when you come in here, you select your API provider. Originally, I was using Anthropic directly, but then I switched to OpenRouter, and then I just pop my API key in there and go.
Okay, so you need to build it. You need to have an account on some API provider.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's just using your key and calling directly. I think they tried to make a business model. I think they came up with their own provider. I haven't experimented with that yet because once I found Open Router, I'm not changing. But yeah. But I could see, like, if you were working at a company that was using GCP for your cloud provider and they had an enterprise account, Vertex AI is their provider platform, and so you could probably easily generate an API key for that platform, have your employer just pay for that directly. So that there is a reason to go directly to something like Vertex or AWS Bedrock if you're an AWS shop, something like that. The employer, which they could probably, all those platforms, I'm sure they could probably configure some rules, like to cut you off at a certain level.
And the app module that you are using right now, how do you encounter, how do you deal with hallucinations? For example, you already provide the act for and it's being running.
Mhm.
Everything. What happens if something, the model hallucinates in the middle of the process and you didn't realize?
Okay, so one thing that's interesting is this is agentic coding. So the reason that's important, if I were to like actually read this line by line, it probably did go down the wrong direction, right? But it caught it. One of the examples that comes up every time, or nearly every time, I have a custom cache library that I wrote, and it never knows how to use it because it's not something that's in any training data, right? And every single time they do the wrong thing. What they do is they take my class and then they guess that, well, the name of the method should be save value. It's every time. It says save value that's the name, but it never compiles, and it recognizes it didn't compile, and then it scans the rest of the code base and says, hey, is he using this class anywhere else? Finds an example, looks at how I called it over there, is like, oh, okay, the name is add or update value, and then it goes back and updates itself, and it keeps going. So it can hallucinate, but it can keep going too. Okay, so it is finished. This green text is basically the summary of, here's what it did, right? Here's the output. So we'll go ahead and go over here, just reload this page. And we see there's a new button here in the action bar. Oh, that doesn't look good. Let me restart this just to make sure. Of course. So I've done this 8 times. 8 times in a row, it got to a successful solution. Now, sometimes they had bugs. I haven't seen this one, though. But this will be fun. Okay, and for time purposes, I probably don't want to run this whole thing, or I can continue the presentation and keep checking back on this. I could either copy the text in. Klein does also have the ability to execute tools at the command line, so it could inspect that and figure it out. I'm hopeful actually it's probably smart enough to figure this out, but it would have been better if I gave it the full text. So it says there is an issue with the dialog Dart file. We have an extra closing brace. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't seen that. Okay, so it's going to rewrite that class. So it needed a little bit of little bump. It'll also write unit tests, and then it'll execute Flutter tests from the command line. It'll read the results of the test. If they didn't pass, it'll fix itself. It'll refactor the code. If it can't write the test because it didn't use dependency injection and it can't mock out some dependency, it'll refactor the code. It's pretty impressive. I have it in the prompt. I told it don't write unit tests right now, just for the purposes of the demo. But it'll check. It'll run Flutter tests with the coverage turned on, and it knows It'll check the coverage file, and it knows the code that it touched, and it'll check to make sure that the unit test it wrote. And the unit. I would only do that if the AI assistant was the one actually doing it. Oh, that's awesome. It's actually even a better demo. So, yeah. So, yeah, like I was saying, it'll run the coverage, and it'll even be smart enough to know, like, hey, I touched these lines, and I have full coverage over the lines that I wrote, and that the test passed, and before it says I'm done. So this is very impressive, and like I said, so here's our actual readability settings. Now let's see if it worked. Okay, so if I increase the font size, you can see, look at that, it's increasing. But it's not changing here. So that's one of the common errors I'll detect. If I tell it to, it'll fix that. But yet it is changing the setting. It's kind of interesting. So it is persisting that. It's just not updating this UI. And then did it catch the system font? No, it did not. None of them have caught the system font yet. And then, oh, that's interesting. So it's got to restore or reset to defaults, which also dismissed the which I don't like. But I like the reset to defaults. About half of the attempts that I've done, that's not in my prompt. It just decided on its own. Oh, he probably wants a reset to defaults. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, I could probably experiment with that. I do find I have seen some system prompt files for that you can get online. I think there's like cursorrules.com or something like that, and you can get like other people's cursor files that they kind of like get ignore files. And I'll see statements like that, and I don't know. I'm kind of like, already we're at 130K of the context window. I feel like there's probably something to the more noise I give it, like they're just redundant commands, the more likely it's going to be to forget something else that I told it to do that might be more important. So I want to think about, is that actually adding value or not? Maybe it is, which, if you've tested it and know that works, then that's awesome. And then the other thing that you were kind of saying, you have control over auto approvals. So I could get granular and I could say, look, it's okay if you want to read files and directories, but don't edit any files without me approving every single edit. Obviously for the purpose of the demo, and I think actually this is another area where the presentation might have modified my workflow. I think I'm even more comfortable just letting it rip and then doing like I would in, like if I had a junior engineer that just submitted a PR, I'll do a full PR review, but I don't need to know the back and forth and all the little things that you tested that didn't work and the paths you went down that were dead ends and you backed up. Just give me the diff at the end and then we'll do a full code review. So this is kind of the way I'm approaching it now. So at this point, I could do a full code review. I would write some tests. Obviously, I would test it to make sure like these little bugs are not there, those types of things. And then I would ship this. Yeah. Yeah, so I actually have screenshots of other versions of this that I'll show you. They're all different. But what it did do, and all of them do this kind of consistent, I have a custom app dialog class that does that bottom sheet like that with my design system in it. And all of them were kind of smart enough to detect, like, oh, he's got a custom class that wraps this bottom sheet, so I'm not going to like do a one-off custom one. I'm going to use the one that he wrote. And so it is smart enough to pick that up, and then it's probably getting the design through that. So it's kind of getting a help.
On that, do you have a common button that you use to utilize that button within the bottom sheet?
This, everything inside this sheet is custom. I don't have anything enforcing those things. Even this convention of having, I didn't specify to this level, even this convention of having a dismiss right there, which is not really following material guidelines, which is kind of the design system I've started off of, that's not in there either. And like I said, this is a poor UX thing. This reset to defaults probably shouldn't dismiss the sheet as well. So it's kind of like, it's just making stuff up. But that's also the level of polish that I would now do at this point. So it got me 90% of the way there, and that last 10% to make it look and work exactly the way I wanted, with quality and with code that I feel is supportable. That's the part where I still have to do. Okay? Okay. So before we go on, back to the demo, I'm just curious, you never know when you stand up here, especially if I'm not a professional presenter that talks to a lot of different audiences. I might be behind every one of you in this room, or maybe I'm up the learning curve further. Like, was there anything surprising or in the code demo that you found like, oh, that's pretty interesting? Anything that you want to share? The cost? Knowing what the API, the true cost is of the underlying model? Yep. Okay. Is everybody doing code like this in their own professionally? I know Suki is. Suki's one of the non-engineers who figured out how to write an entire Instagram clone. Oh, okay. We got to see the demo. Yeah, where's your product management, Microsoft? Is that? Yeah. So very impressive. Okay, so here I'm just showing, these are 4 of the different outputs that I've gotten. I think that one second to left has some of my edits in it to polish it up, and that's probably the one I'll end up shipping. But as you can see, like, it's very subjective, right? What I don't know, and I haven't done yet on this particular project, I don't have a UX designer that I work with. So I'm more than happy to just have the AI assistant take a shot at it, and then if I think it looks pretty good, I'm good with it, right? If I had a designer, which on 2 of my other projects I do, my business partner is a UX designer. If he gave me and he expects pixel perfect implementation, if he gave me something pixel perfect, I don't know what's going to happen. I suspect I could probably upload mockups and provide that as context. It'll probably get me pretty close, but I'll end up doing the pixelation at the end. But if it worked and got me there, I'd be happy to do that. All right, so the last part of my presentation is kind of getting a little bit more philosophical about the AI and where we're going, which I find exciting. So we're bombarded with these types of headlines every day now. So on the right there, Anthropic, that CEO, he said in 3 to 6 months, 90% of the code will be written by the AI. And he goes further, he doubles down on it. Later in the same interview, he says in 12 months, there won't be any code that's not written by the AI. That's a bold claim. The guy on the left is the CEO of Replit, one of those tools that I highlighted earlier. He's saying, don't even study coding anymore. I have a daughter, and I was really excited about the UT GDG being here. I tried to get my daughter to come out. She's 16. She's considering going to UT to be in the CS program. She asked me the other day, she's like, Dad, is this a good field to go into? Like, I don't know. So even like 16-year-old girls in high school are having AI anxiety. So who in the room? Give me a show of hands. Who's worried? Who's worried? I worried about it. The presentation helped me though. Okay. All right, so let's bring this thing back down to earth here. I'm glad that actually the demo kind of worked the way it did. It's not perfect. It doesn't just produce perfect code the first pass, but it was able to recover, and it got me pretty close. And I could have kept going with it, and it would have got to something that I would consider shipping. But there are still limitations, and some of them became way more apparent to me over the last few months, where I've really started digging into this technology to see how it works. So right now, there's current limitations, and then there's but they're probably going to be solved, right? And then so those CEOs might be correct. Now, I've been at this. I was entering the workforce in the .com bubble days. And I've seen the hype cycles. I got sucked in. I was 20 years old. I was like, oh, the internet's changing the world. Everybody's going to be out of a job. The world did change, but people weren't out of a job. So I've seen hype cycles come and go, and I don't think this is going to be any different. It's definitely a hype cycle. I wouldn't have anxiety if you're coming out of school right now, and I'm going to tell you why here when we close. But the limitations I want to dig into here are specifically ones that I don't think the bigger, better model that's going to ship next week, I don't think it will ever solve these problems, okay? All right, so we'll go through them in turn. All right, so the first misconception I had probably when GPT 3.5 hit, they're referring to this stuff as AI, but AGI, oh, that's when it really gets interesting, right? Because that's right around the corner. Any minute now, AGI is going to hit. AGI is artificial general intelligence, the point at which is not even like strictly defined, by the way, but it's the point at which the AI can do anything a human can do, but better. Here's the thing, AGI I don't think is the same thing as human consciousness, and I don't think it ever will be. I don't know exactly how to classify what AI is, whether it's like if you want to call it intelligence, or if you want to call it like maybe they've unlocked like the secrets of how the human brain memory works. Like context might be like short-term memory, and the language model itself might be long-term memory, but at a scale that we can't even comprehend, that's beyond our understanding. That might be true. I don't know exactly the words because I'm not a biologist or a neuroscientist or even an LLM engineer, right? But what I can tell you is they don't have emotions. They don't have the idea of self. They don't have ambition. They don't have greed. They don't have empathy for people. They don't have ego. So there's always going to be some things that the AI is not going to do that will always remain human tasks, okay? I think it is upon us to understand the limitations of the tool, where to employ it, not ignore it. But there will be things that you're going to be employable in the future. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It can take on the qualities of what it might be to be a human in that role. But I think it's still fundamentally different than human consciousness. And just a side note that I think is very fascinating. I was even using ChatGPT to like kind of explore this idea, like how is it like the human brain and how is it not? How is it different? And one of the things that I learned is, neuroscientists don't even understand how consciousness works. They can't explain it. We don't know if the current technology path that we're going on is going to ultimately lead to like replicating things like emotion and consciousness. We don't even understand how it works. Not only that, the funniest part was last week Anthropic their research team released a paper that was talking about they're trying to understand how LLMs work. They don't even know exactly how they're working. And they have these great papers, by the way, I recommend reading them. But they have come up with these tests, and they're developing this thing that they're calling the microscope, so that they can see into the LLM's memory to understand like what parts of its brain are getting lit up when they ask it certain questions. And then they do things like they've got these tools where they can inject or to amplify or detune like clusters of knowledge. And then they run these tests on it to try to understand how does it even work, and they don't know. They're still studying it. So not worried about that from like a competing with biology. And then the funny thing is, as engineers, we've all had this experience where we've looked at somebody else's code and we're like, oh, that code is shit. Like, it's way too complex. There's no way that you needed to do all that. Like, I can do the same thing in this more elegant way. And then you do your simplified, elegant way implementation. You start testing it, and you realize, oh, there's this edge case you didn't handle. So you add some code to handle that edge case. And there's this another edge case. And so you add a component to handle that edge case. Then you realize the approach you went down was probably not going to work. And you end up recreating what the original code was doing. We've all done this. It's part of human nature, I think. I'm just going to plant this seed. The more we learn about biology and neuroscience, the more impressive it is. And what if we decide, yeah, guess what? We're not going to hit that on current trajectory. We're going to need to have leaps of technology that we invent. And what if we reverse engineer our way back into human biology? And we realize, oh yeah, the only way to achieve consciousness is exactly what we're doing. And we already know how to make new humans, so it doesn't make sense. Okay, so I should probably move faster, but this next one I think is a big one on two levels. The AI is never going to have as much context as the human does. So context management is like, you just can't underscore this enough. Like, you've got to give the AI a fighting chance. You've got to give it enough context that it understands the task, but not so much context that it gets lost. And it will never handle as much context as you have. And on a micro level, what I mean by that is, imagine you're working at a company, you've been there 2 years, and you've been in all the product management meetings and all the UX designer meetings, and you've been meeting one-on-ones with your boss, and you hear of all the political things that are happening about your project, and you go to lunch with your engineering friends, and you talk about code all day, and then when you sit down to write a feature, you are subconsciously bringing all that context to that feature development. When you're talking to the AI, these AI calls they're stateless. They're strangers to you every single time you call them. They have amnesia, they don't know who you are, and whatever context you want to give it, you have to provide on every single API call. And there's only a limited amount that you can provide. It's never going to have as much context as you. And in a weird way, the human, we might become more indispensable because of the continuity we bring to a project, even if the AI is doing most of the work. So it's kind of a weird twist that you might be more indispensable in the future. And then on a macro level, I'm sorry, that was the macro level. The micro level is actually, I learned this, I tried to use, and I've seen this, other people online have said the same thing. These things are not really good at debugging production code or any code. And I tried to use it to identify a bug that I had in production, and it became really apparent to me why, that they're really bad at this, and it's because of what we're asking them to do. So imagine, like, when I'm troubleshooting, the first thing I'm going to try to do is reproduce the bug, and so I'm going to maybe try to figure out what the user was doing, what buttons they were pressing, what the scenario was. And then I'm going to try to get my application into that state. I'm going to use a step-in debugger and walk through the code logic to see what happens, what unexpected thing happened. I might do some logging files, things like that. The AI is literally just approaching your code, again, as a stranger, knowing nothing about your project, and it's taking the 1 or 2 sentences, maybe the error message that you had. It's taking that, and it's just reading your source code. It doesn't have runtime access. It doesn't have data. It doesn't have state. It doesn't have a step-in debugger. That problem's probably solvable, but doesn't work today. And so it's literally just reading your source code. And to make it even worse, these AI tools, they won't ever come back and just say, yo, I don't know. I have no idea how to fix this. They won't say that. They will confidently give you some answer. And it's probably wrong. It'll confidently recommend that you refactor some code to fix this bug that you don't actually have and introduce some other bug. I've seen it happen. On a micro level, they just don't have the there's a lot of state that they don't have access to, and a lot of context that they would need to better troubleshoot that they just don't have. Yeah, I'm just going to keep going here. So this was a misconception I also had early on, maybe the second one, and even when I was like talking to some non-technical friends of mine about the presentation, apparently a lot of people have this misconception. These AI models are trained on a massive data set. It takes months with a data center size level of compute, months to train on this data, and then they stop. Once that model is created, there's some post-training exercises that they do. It might take months and months to get a model to production to where it's available, at which point the training cutoff might have been 4, 5, 6 months ago. So these models don't know anything beyond that cutoff point, and that's not just relevant for like current events. That's also relevant for us as engineers, because all the packages that we're using, all the libraries we're calling, they're evolving. They have new versions cutting all the time. They're deprecating APIs. And you'll see it. Like if you use an older model, it'll try to do all these things that are deprecated in the code. It doesn't understand why it's deprecated. These models don't learn. And I put this in this category of like, even if we could solve the technical problem of like the compute and like it could actually like learn in real time, even if we could solve that problem, I think this goes way beyond that. Because imagine like this LLM's talking to everybody in this room, and half of you are just telling it crazy stuff, right? Or stuff that's subjective and I don't agree with it, but you're basically training the models like, no, you don't ever want to do that. And so how does the AI know? How does it know what to do? What is fact? What's fiction? What's subjective? What's your opinion? What if you're wrong? How does it know? Do you have authority? What are all the security implications of this? The safety implications? Could a bad actor inject a bunch of really bad stuff into a model's memory? So I don't know that these models are ever going to be able to learn. Like this is this whole pipeline that they have is a very tightly controlled pipeline where they've curated the data and they've gone through extensive like safety and alignment training, post-training. I don't think these things will be able to learn. So I think that's a huge limitation that you would expect a junior engineer to be able to walk in. If they keep making the same mistake over and over and you're correcting them, you'd get rid of them, right? Like that's just a baseline expectation of a human that like, hey, you pick stuff up and you learn and you get better, right? These things don't do that. And then the last big limitation I see here is, and this was really apparent to me building the presentation as well. What I showed today was just a workflow just for software engineering, just for coding, right? But it doesn't actually like encapsulate everything that I do as an engineer. And I'm a solo indie dev on this project, so I'm doing the marketing, the publishing of the app, the troubleshooting, and the maintaining. I'm answering feedback questions. These are all tasks that I'm having to do that have nothing to do with this coding workflow. So at best, even if I'm going to call this a 10x improvement, because that's the buzzword, even if I'm going to call this a 10x improvement with my coding ability, that has nothing to do with anything else that I do. So just doing the math, like if coding was generously 33% of my time and this was a 10x improvement, you're looking about a 25% productivity increase, not a 10x productivity increase. And now I'll say the optimistic thing or interesting thing about this is I think all of those, I'm thinking now more in terms of workflows. Product management, what they do is several different workflows, research, road mapping, that kind of stuff. UX design, several different workflows. QA, different workflows. These are all separate workflows, and I think there probably is a tool stack that does automate that workflow and could unlock potential 10x gains. But every single one of them is different, and I'm finding that like what I learned on this one does not necessarily apply, does not apply to any of the other workflows because, again, kind of wrapping back to the beginning of the presentation, the real innovation here was at that tooling level, not the model. So I don't think a bigger, better model is going to solve it. I think you need better tooling for every single one of those workflows. Therein lies the opportunity for software engineers to create new tools to automate different workflows. It also creates an opportunity for what I'm kind of calling the AI engineer. Like this might be the future role, is figuring out all the problems that we've been listing here is figuring out what is the AI tool stack, or do I need to create one, a tool? How do I provide the LLM with just the right amount of context, but not too much? It's kind of the art form of that. And how do I automate that? And how do I go from a 50% performance increase to a 10x performance increase? That's the opportunity. So I think leave you with a little bit of optimism on that. And the final slide here, humans are tool builders. My closing line is on the last slide. Okay, so humans are tool builders. You know, fire was a tool, the wheel was a tool. These are huge inventions. Math is a tool. AI is just another tool. And the kicker here is that only people who learn how to use the tool are the ones that are going to create leverage from the tool. And to master the tool, master any tool, you've got to deeply understand how that tool works and the physics behind it, the first order principle thinking, or first order thinking. And what I'm saying here to give you some techno optimism at the end of the presentation, I think not only are software engineers not going to get replaced, I think software engineers are best oriented or best positioned to understand how this stuff actually works. So we're in the best position to actually unlock and leverage this for every workflow, right? And so I think we're best positioned moving forward, career-wise, of any discipline. And so absolutely, I would tell my daughter she should be a comp sci major at UT. Okay, and that's it. Thank you for coming, and we can do... Suki. Oh, are you bringing a whole list?
One of them is you said you switched from cursor to line.
Right.
Is there a reason why you switched from cursor to line? And the second question is, there is a fork of line called root code, which is like more advanced. It has more functionalities and the likes, more configurations. Have you heard of that? So the first is, why did you switch from Klein, from cursor to Klein? And then the second is, have you heard of root code, basically?
Okay, so yes. So the reason I switched from Cursor, I had been using Cursor, and it was working for me. And then I watched a YouTube video of somebody else that was using Klein. And I was like, ooh, that looks kind of interesting. So I wanted to test it out. What's that?
AI Code King.
No, I don't think it was him. I think it was Addy. I think he works at Google. He gave some presentations about it. I actually have root code installed. I have not used it yet. But it is something to point out. It's just a plug into VS Code. So I can use root code right next to Klein, and I can kind of switch back and forth. I'm sure root code's a fork of Klein, so I'm sure it'll... I believe the reason they forked was the community was so excited about Klein that they were dropping PRs left and right, and the Klein maintainers didn't want to accept all the PRs fast enough. And so I kind of see root code as like the experimental, crazy, like out there, like, but they've added a lot of complexity to it as well. Like the plan and act mode in Klein is expanded to like 6 different roles in root.
Even has a mode called Boomerang, and Boomerang is like multiple edits on steroids, so you can hit an entirely full feature, and it's going to break those features down into tasks, and then execute on each of those tasks.
Yeah, I heard about it. I haven't looked at that. Like I said, this stuff is moving so fast. Like half the people in the room might be ahead of me. So.
Yeah, so my question is, you mentioned that
But have you considered like using multiple AIs like that work with each other, having their own roles, like basically agentic AI, which each have their own purpose and they talk to each other? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so the question is, could you have multiple AIs working together in different roles? So I'll kind of tie in multiple parts of the presentation on that. If you consider every single role as its own workflow, and I do think every single workflow could be get a 10x productivity boost from using AI. Somebody has to invent that work, or engineer that workflow and figure it out. Could you stitch them all together? Yes, you could. Would I want a human in the loop, though? Probably at every checkpoint in traditional development, which would be product management. I actually used AI to generate a huge product doc because we're going to localize our app, and I wanted to know like what are the right localizations to go after. And I had to do a huge, deep research report on that. And then the humans, me and my business partner, we sat around and talked about it, right? And then we started going into architecture, and then we get in architecture, and then we're going to start doing system prompt. So I still see it as it's the same process. I probably want a human in the loop at the conclusion of each one. So yeah, in theory, you could stitch it all together. I don't know. I think I'd probably want a human in the loop there.
Do you came across we use as a software developer Asana for Jira for our task schedule? So do you see anything like AI tool that can take the task from Asana dashboard and directly code? So have you came across something?
I haven't personally done that. I have seen some people doing that. There is a feature of Klein and that the whole industry seems to be adopting this called this MCP, where you can create, basically it's an architecture where I can create an MCP server that maybe wraps Asana. And then that gives Klein the ability to talk to Asana on a standardized way. So I think what you're describing is perfectly doable, for sure. We'll just stay on this side of the room since you have the mic.
Thanks, Chad, for the presentation. I have a question regarding prompt engineering, like the prompt you've been using to develop or showcase. Do you have any advice? For example, I know there's a lot of resources, like templates have to use to do the prompt, to come up with the prompt. But my question, for example, will it be different, for example, prompt when you design phone app or using Flutter versus web app? Or in my case, I'm more in Salesforce side. I do development in CRM tools. I use Copilot and Agentforce. So my question is just, do you have any tips regarding prompts and templates for prompt?
Prompt engineering is a whole thing, which I have not, I'm just still learning. But what I would say, this memory bank feature of Klein, in that memory bank, there's a tech context. And in here, I tell it about my project and the tech stack that I'm using. The version of Flutter, Dart, the state management tool that I'm using. So in here, I would imagine you could just describe your Salesforce stack and sort of give it that equivalent. And then I think if your task-specific prompt, the one that I cut and paste in, if you just left it as, here's what I want to accomplish, right, that it would probably work. So I think if you consider all this is part of the prompt, really, right?
Did you use AI to define that prompt, versions of that prompt? Or
Yeah.
you just have
Yeah, so I started with a prompt. I did that planning process. I was using DeepSeek. DeepSeek kept asking me questions. I'd go back and update the prompt instead of just answering the questions, rerun it. So yeah, I did iterate on that prompt with the AI. And then Klein itself used AI to create the initial version of this memory bank. So all this was AI generated. And it documented my project pretty accurately, and then I made a few changes. And so yeah, that was all AI generated. And in fact, their system prompt is told, if you say make changes to one of these things that's no longer valid, it's supposed to maintain the memory bank for you. So it even keeps it up to date as part of its tasks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
So once you get to the stage where you are reviewing the pull request or the changes or the code that was generated, how much do you find yourself having to modify it? Let's adjust the logic, not the UI. Let's forget about the UI.
Yeah, I was trying to keep the presentation from going too long. I do modify it quite a bit, sometimes more than others. So, for example, the things that it's not going to do well, there might be like small decisions that I've made that I know, like I've got this constant that's defined in this constants file that tells me the border radius that I want to use across the app. And I know that if there's a border radius, I want to use that constant. And then I've seen it, it'll just put the number of points of border radius that's in there. But I'll go through and I'll fix things like that so that, I'm kind of maintaining my coding patterns. But it's the exact same thing I would do for a junior engineer who just joined the team. I'll say, hey, listen, we've got constants files over here. I would have the engineer fix that. But it's mostly like things that are like, it'd probably take me longer to type in to the prompt and watch the AI do it than just change the code. But I do end up changing quite a bit.
And going from the starting to write the prompt and when it's ready to go to production, do you find it faster this way, or if you were to do it by yourself without the help of AI?
So I definitely, well, it depends on the feature. So I'll give you a real example. We did that rebranding, and in the rebrand, there was some extra complexity here where I basically, from the designer, I just got a bunch of mock-ups and font files and color patches. This project was using in Flutter, if you're not familiar with Flutter, so like Google makes material design, and they have a bunch of material design concepts in their code. But they also want to support iOS, and so they have Cupertino widgets as well. And in the project, because I'm an iOS developer, I had sort of mixed over time to where I was using like half Cupertino and half material stuff. And I don't really like the material design. I don't want my app to look like an Android app. And so that's a personal preference. So I had sort of mixed them and kind of like, it wasn't very clean. So I wanted to also refactor at the same time, but I didn't want to use material right out of the box. I wanted to modify it to where it looked the way I wanted it. So I was doing a full refactor of the sort of design system implementation, cleaning up a lot of things, making a lot of subjective decisions about where I should use this accent color and where I shouldn't. The dark mode in here I think looks actually really good. So I was making a bunch of subjective decisions. AI wasn't going to help me with any of it. So for the past like month, I didn't use AI that much actually. So there is some things it's really good at, some things it's not. One of the other limitations that I found is like this AI, this project is just my Flutter app, but I have a back end, and I've been moving more and more logic into the back end, into cloud functions there. And so as the architect, I'll sit down and decide at the beginning of the feature implementation what I want to live on the back end, what I want on the front end. And when I have to do an implementation that requires a back end API change, I have to switch over to that project, and it doesn't have any of the context of who's calling it, right? So it doesn't have any of the context of this project. So I have to switch projects. That one's written in TypeScript on a Node.js platform. And I have to like tell it these API changes I want to make. And then I have to switch back to this one, and I have to implement sections of it once the API is available. So it's like you get to where you're still doing a lot of lifting here. Like you're still doing architecture. You're still doing this in pieces because this tool cannot make the front end and the back end change at once. Like the two AIs don't see each other's projects, right? So that's just some limitations that we currently have.
So I saw that you had some rules file. You called it the memory bank. Is that like a feature that Klein just released? Memory bank? Is that a Klein feature?
They released it probably, I don't know, 6 weeks ago.
Okay, gotcha. Because I know they have Klein rules that you can make custom rules. So I was wondering if that's similar to these.
Yeah, they recommend you use both, and I don't know if that's just a documentation, stale documentation issue, or if this is like the new way, but yeah, they support both still. Looks like we have one more here.
You said a lot about how the AI codes like a junior engineer. So coming from someone who's not even at the level of a junior engineer, but like at the intern level, how do you suggest we use these tools and like learn from them and not just completely vibe code because we don't even know if it's telling us what is right or wrong?
Yeah, that's a great question. So he's saying if he's just coming into coding, what recommendations I might have for somebody who's just coming in to vibe coding. So one, I would probably still write some code by hand. And two, I would do a lot more conversation with the AI. I mean, it's really good at doing things like answering your questions. Like, why did you do that? Why'd you do it this way and not this other way? And it'll say crazy stuff like, now that you mention it, that is a better way to do it, and it'll rewrite the code. When I was first messing with ChatGPT, it said something, it completely hallucinated something, and I was like, that's not true. And it was like, oh yeah, you're right, that I totally made a mistake, and it fixed itself. And I was like, yeah, but go back there. Like, how did you just make a mistake, but you also know the answer? And he's like, don't worry about that. It literally told me, don't worry about it. Just keep going. It was the funniest experience I've had. But these thinking models is kind of a good example where this is a pattern that I've learned is you can have it spit something out, and then you can immediately ask it, does that make sense? And it'll check itself, and it does a better job of that. There's something unique about the way these LLMs are wired. It does a better job checking itself than it does sometimes authoring the original file. So I would just suggest that you spend a lot more time conversing and asking it like, hey, why did you do it this way, not that way?
Okay, so I want to piggyback off of what Kyler asked about. And so I know there's a lot of free like coding things you can do, like videos or like stuff, so like the Harvard CS50 and like Google Analytics and Coursera stuff. What would you recommend is the most useful to teach someone coding? So maybe it may not just be the coding itself, but how to think properly. So it could be textbooks or like resources. Are there any that are free that you think are really useful, or some you think it's worth paying for?
Yeah, so I'm so far removed from that I wouldn't have a specific resource for you, but I can give you some advice. And I'm telling my daughter the same thing. So anything you do in life, like you need to focus on fundamentals first. You need to actually understand from first order principles, like what is actually happening. So are you in CS UT or?
I'm in informatics, the human-centered data science concentration. So I'm a lot more on the like data analysis and like visualization side. Okay,
yeah, perfect. So, you're going to need that like sort of academic underpinning as you move forward. And as long as, and I've seen this because I've hired a lot of people right out of school. And as long as you're able to think clearly and you ask good questions and you'll learn very quickly. It's very impressive, actually. A smart person, how quickly they'll pick stuff up. But I would just focus on fundamentals and especially if you want to code. Like if you're not in a CS program, I don't know how much coding you actually do in your program, but you might be tempted to just hack, right? Just get something done, just kind of stitch something together, script it. But I would go beyond that. You were going to say something?
Yeah, so currently I'm doing two things. I'm on R a lot, doing a lot of data visualizations, and it's definitely tempting to just use ChatGPT, especially since I'm at the lower level. It's easy for it to like make exactly what I want accurately, but I know at the upper level, like you said, it all comes down to the fundamentals. And also in informatics, we have a lot of courses that involve AI and machine learning, and I'm in one where it's text mining and NLP essentials right now. And so I think I'm still at the beginning of learning that, but still it's so hard not to use ChatGPT and just copy the code and like have that like integrity to like really learn it and at least try to code and work through it first.
Yeah, and you know, you just always remember like this is the perfect time of your life where it is time to slow down and actually like understand what's going on. You know, one of the key things I look for in interviewing is just a innate sense of curiosity. Like, how does that work? Like somebody once asked me, a mechanic asked me because I was working on a car. A mechanic asked me one time, he's like, "Did you ever take apart your lawnmower growing up?" I was like, "Yeah, I wanted to know how it worked." And he's like, "Yeah." So like, if you find yourself like working on something, just take the time to like drill in. It's like, I don't know how that works. We have YouTube now and we have ChatGPT. Like the information is out there, the knowledge is out there. Spend the time, be curious, and just dig. And follow your curiosity and follow your interest. It'll lead you in the right path. But as long as you like if you slow down and just follow that curiosity, you're going to do well.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you for an amazing session. So one question that I have is, I didn't really see whether you were running your code or whether that was client doing it for you. So I was using Cursor last week, and while using Cursor, I had to reload my node servers and rerun my React and everything. So does client does that for you? And if it does, then if you're running Flutter, now I have been using Flutters, and I know like how does hot reload and hot restart works. Does client know when to hot reload and when to hot restart? Because hot reload basically like refreshes your UI while maintaining the state and all. So that's what.
Yeah. So yeah, the question is kind of more. That was the first thing that kind of brought me into Klein was when Sonnet added the computer use, and then they had that feature in there. So if you've got a web app, this is actually an interesting tangent, but if you've got a web app, it'll actually run in the GUI and click around, and it'll test the code at runtime and fix it, right? I did try to experiment with that a little bit, and I did not get that to work yet. I haven't spent much time on it. But you know, Flutter also supports web. So I'm curious if I add support for web, if I would be able to use the browser tool. And with MCPs, I've already seen some people committing some open source MCPs that'll like control the simulator, like what I was using here. It can launch an app, it can do things like that. So I think it is all possible. I'm not doing any of that though, because what I'm finding is I'm gonna wanna test the code anyway. And I just haven't needed to. And in fact, when it switches over to that browser use, it's kind of slow, right? So unless you're planning to like leave the thing running and walk away, it's probably not. It's probably just faster for you to just like, hey, you think you're done? Let me just refresh this thing and check it out. That's been my experience so far.
Thank you.
All right, I think we've exhausted everybody. Oh, no. We got one more.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoy it. I'm a bit worried about what the CEOs are saying to learn to code. So I'm looking at the Google website. I came across this architecture of no code, low code. So I'm thinking like around enterprise architecture softwares, whereby our leaders in the industry are referring us to active inference and generative AI is going to go away. I'm thinking like, what is the future of software engineers? What is going to be changing? For instance, how do we brand ourselves in today's market to stand out?
All right, is this working? Yeah. All right, so that's a big question. First off, I'm going to say this about these CEOs. These guys have to raise billions of dollars from investors. If they're not up there saying these hyperbolic things, like they're not going to raise that money. So just keep that in mind. They have to say those things. You know, I wouldn't put much weight on it. Number two, you mentioned no code, low code. So that's kind of that class of tool on the left that I showed earlier, and I made a distinction that is not the tools that I'm talking about. And you will never see me go no code, low code, right? Because I've got 25 years experience doing software engineering, and it's like a superpower that most people don't have, and so why would I get away from it? The no code, low code is really meant for the, let's say, you know, you're an accountant, but you have a knack for software and you want to try to create something for an accountant. Like, it's great for that, right? Because you don't have the underpinning and the fundamentals of software engineering, but you've got an idea and you want to crank something out. I think it's great for that. So it kind of depends on your background and where you're coming from. But if you're more on the sort of business side and but you want to start making some products and getting some value out of it, I think it's great. But if you're a software engineer now, don't go down that path. That's for the people who can't code, right? And so, and again, I think the whole point of my presentation, or not the whole point, but like where I ended up was, I even concluded through the whole thing, it's like you're best positioned. If you do understand how this stuff works, you're best positioned in the future to be the person inventing those new workflows, automating things that are currently manual. That's where all the leverage is coming from. So that whole AI engineer, I think, like vibe coding kind of took off. That's a term I think I want to take off. An AI engineer is a guy who understands how to take all these tools, stitch them together, automate some off-the-shelf workflow, whether that's a business workflow, a business automation, or automating tasks that different people are performing. I think there's an exciting new opportunity to just be the guy that can do that. Because this stuff does not work out of the box. And if any business owner thinks they're going to automate their business and transform, but they're not technical people, I don't see it happening. It ain't going to happen. They're going to have to hire you. All right. Thanks, everybody.
I want to take a second to advertise something really quick. We're starting Flutter Fridays, where on Fridays we're going to meet up at not random, coffee shops and public spaces around Austin. And I'll post it on the Flutter Austin Meetup. We have them coming up this Friday from 1 to 5. If you happen to be free and you can make it, I'll be there. It's going to be at Saltillo Coffee on, it's on the east side on 4th Street, I think. And it's just going to be some people working on Flutter projects. You can bring what you have. You can come get inspiration, get unstuck with your projects. And it's going to be fun. Look for me on a table with this little guy, Dash.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm like 6%, so I don't want to use my phone.
Oh yeah.
But what I think is something that is not, they are not really good about embedded systems.
Exactly. Yeah.
They are really not good because most of the projects that are with embedded systems are not open source. So all these things are good at coding because they have documentations in it. So if you go to look at ROS documentation, operating systems or embedded systems, and for everything that is related with creating an Arduino, for example, if you want to look at like a code that works on that Arduino, there is a huge spectrum of how this thing works. So for that, I think that it's going to be in robotics somehow. People will have to do really good things in robotics. And if you have experience on this, you want to go level of code.
Yeah, I just had that feeling like, you have to learn so much more stuff.
Yeah, but for me, what
hardware, like
for
metal,
the most difficult thing for me right now, what is happening to me is that I'm working at a lab right now that my colleagues don't know how to code. And I do, and I have the knowledge from physics and how, since I'm working with drones. But like the most difficult thing for me, and I really don't understand it, or maybe I don't like it, is the hardware. Like today I was at a lab with my friends, and they said like you can do that because there is an issue with power consumption. And I was like, what? I didn't even understand it. Oh, like that knowledge from computer engineering. Yeah, it's gonna be. Yeah. That's weird. Yeah, and robotics, it's all about that. From prototyping to having something really good. I think that computer engineering really knowledge.
Yeah, I'm thinking of taking a robotics course.
I will for the next my patient right now, since I'm doing features, I don't have the qualifications to say this, but I say it's just my way of thinking. I'm gonna go to different places. What do you mean? On the second field is robotics. I'm not talking about that intelligent enough to understand what I'm doing research. I haven't received an offer for a PhD, but I think it's my professor is pushing me to go to the PhD, but I don't think that I will be good at it. But as soon as possible,